There's a lot of designing, testing, and trial runs behind every new innovation or new performance record. How do I know? My name's Shelby, and performance is my business.
Mustang Sally. Guess you better slow your Mustang down. Oh Lord, what I said now. Mustang Sally now, baby. Oh Lord, guess you better slow your Mustang down. Oh yeah. You've been running all over town now. Oh, I guess I have to put your flat feet on the ground.
And our troops are getting ready for another season and another crack at those red Ferraris. We've got a couple of new entries in our stable this year. The new Mustang-based GT350 and the first American car of its kind, the new Ford GT. This GT350 is a racing version of Ford's Mustang 2+2. We set the cars up for racing by installing special components, racing shocks and so on. We're doing a lot of testing as well. The new Mustang-based GT350 will compete against the E-Type Jags, the Sunbeam Tigers, and Corvettes. We have high hopes for all of these cars this year. We hope that by racing with Ford, we can make this an American year. Very soon now, we'll be racing these cars against the best competition in the world.
Shelby Mustang came along because Coco went to Sport Car Club of America and says, we're going to make the Mustang a sport car. And I didn't know about this till about a month later. They'd gone to John Bishop and told him that they were going to make it a sport car. And he says, well, it's not a sport car, it's a four-seat car, it's not a sport car. He called me and said, can you make a sport car? So I called my guys together, the people that I worked with at Ford and the people that, the Al Dowds and the Phil Remingtons, and said, can we make this a sport car? And then I called, we decided we could, and then I called John Bishop and said, John, what does it take to make the Mustang a sport car instead of saying, we're going to make this a sport car? And he says, oh, hell, Shelby, says that's pretty simple. Says take the back seat out and change the suspension around so that it handles better and it's not a little old mushy six-cylinder. They'd started putting the V8s in them then. And so I got them to build a high-performance 289 V8. We took the suspension and changed it. We put a large rear end in it. Took the rear seat out. And went out and beat the hell out of the Corvettes with it.
The Shelby GT350 began life in 1965 as a rough-and-tumble performance fastback with power, handling, and blue-chip pedigree. It immediately dusted its competition, including the Corvettes, in the SCCA's B production category on its way to the national championship in 1965, 66, and 67.
You're way on top now. Since you left me, you're always laughing.
What's really cool about the GT350s is, really this was a response that Ford had for SCCA racing to go racing against the Corvettes.
They were modified actual street cars that you're out there racing, and they weren't just specially built race cars. And you could really relate that you could go out and buy a car very similar to the race car.
Shelby was famous for so many things, but I think for a lot of real car guys, the GT350 represents one of the purest examples of what he was always trying to do, which was to take something that might be sort of plain and make it a lot better, which was really the idea behind the original Cobra, and that's absolutely what you have here.
When Shelby came out with his version of the Mustang, of course that was much easier. It was obviously a Mustang, and yet there was something about the car that if you saw one coming at you down the road or in a parking lot, there was just something about the silhouette of that car that you knew it was more than just a Mustang. I think the tires filling up the wheel wells, just the aggressive stance that the car had, the stripes, the hood scoop, the hood pins, the things that you were used to seeing on a real race car, and at that time you didn't see them on street cars. We've been publishing the Club magazine for 17 years, and during that time we've interviewed a lot of people who worked for Shelby. I'm always joking that we'll never run out of people, but it seems like to a person, every one of them has said that the time that they spent with Shelby American and the Cobras and Carroll Shelby was probably the high point of their life, although they didn't realize it at the time.
In the early days, everybody had to do 3 jobs. The marketing man had to be the salesman, sometimes the janitor, sometimes the chief engineer had to be the chief mechanic, or had to wipe the cars off, clean them up. So it was really a very interesting time. We had a lot of spirit around the place over in Venice, California at that time, and I long for those days because I had more fun then building cars than I ever have since then.